The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello, and help me welcome the Honorable Steve Negron. Steve,
how you doing? I'm doing well, Carl. Great to be back with you.
Okay, you're not running for anything yet.
Right now, I'm going home and watching The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel when I go home. So right now, just taking a long deserved time off.
Good. Yes.
And just seeing how I can help. Yes, we did 2 times in the ring is quite a lot.
Yeah.
So, but now it's great. Helping other people.
Good.
Trying to win. So we'll see what we do in the future.
Well, one of the things we were talking about is the districting here in the state. And what do you tell the audience what you were telling me about what you thought about it originally?
Sure. Well, there was a lot of people that put a lot of effort into this. And when that first original proposed redistricting came out, I was a bit surprised. I believe I understood what the idea was to be able to, since Congressman Bass had last won CD2, and then you had Frank Ginta going back and forth with Carol Shea Porter. They wanted to at least have one Republican congressperson in, so that at worst it's a cancel vote, right? You have one Republican, and they had, conceded CD2 to the current Congresswoman Ann Custer. And so when you look at how they try to redistrict the map, in my opinion, they took a lot of these Republican strongholds that were in CD2 and moved them over to CD1, and then divested Democratic strongholds in CD1 and moved them over to CD2, so that we could have a better chance in CD1 to have a candidate that comes out of there that would have a better probability of winning that congressional seat. And quite frankly, in my opinion, what they've done is they've just abdicated CD2 and just decided that that's a lost cause, and just give it to the Democrats, and they'll have CD2 and in hopes that we would have CD1. The truth of the matter is that at the end of the day, there are no guarantees. And even though we have been unsuccessful, myself twice, to try to unseat Congresswoman Custer, CD2 is winnable. And I think what I see and how I interpreted it was they wanted to be able to have something that was very focused and myopic and, quite frankly, short term. They wanted to be able to win a race in 22. That's what they wanted to do. And I think that was the battle cry. And I think what the problem is that you tell probably more than half of the state clearly by land, and hopefully 50-50 by population, that we're going to give up on that side of the state. We're going to give up on you. We're going to concede that to the Democrats. And we're just going to focus on our small stronghold in CD1. And I honestly believe that had we had a better opportunity to fundraise better, to go after Congresswoman Custer and do a compare and contrast, I believe we would have had a higher probability of certainly getting closer and maybe even beating her. So we got 42% of the vote in 18, and we got 44.5% of the vote in 20. So we knew that we were closing the gap against many odds, right? So clearly, when you looked at a small campaign, primarily self-funded campaign, with some donations from some great folks in the state of New Hampshire, we were going to close the gap. When all of a sudden now you see the legislator come out and disregard what had happened in 18 and in 20, that they were just going to focus on CD1, was a bit disheartening and disconcerting, right? Because all those people, they really had a belief that they had an opportunity to have somebody in Congress with a voice, then that would have been something they could look forward to. Quite frankly, in 22, if this map had continued on and the governor would not have come out and said he was going to veto it, I think they would have just said, why even come out and vote, right? They've given up on CD2 and they've thrown us to the wolves, and everybody was going to focus primarily into CD1. And when you do something like that, then all of the efforts in the state go to CD1. Sure. The governor would go to CD1, everybody in executive council, everybody would be focusing to try to win that one seat and just abandon CD2. And I think, quite frankly, that's poor form. Every Republican and all parts of the state are equally important, and we should be able to try and let them know that we're fighting for them and on their behalf. And by looking at what they did with this proposed map, I think that they were telling those people in CD2 that, sorry, not this time. Let's wait for 10 years and maybe we can redistrict it again. So I think there was just, and I'm glad, quite frankly, that the governor has said publicly that he would veto it if it came to his desk.
So it's on hold sort of now.
Right.
Because I hear that somebody doesn't want to make any changes. Other people have different changes.
Right.
So what do you think is going to come out of this?
Well, I had looked at what the governor had proposed as a counteroffer, if you will, moving some of those stronghold Democratic cities like Portsmouth and Durham back into CD1. And really look at where you were and try to even out the fairness. And I think with Governor Sununu's proposal is that both districts probably increase by a percentage point. I think that's fair. I think that still makes it competitive. Prior to this redistricting, I think CD1 was an R plus 0.5 and CD2 was a D plus 2. So yeah, there was a bit of a disparity, right? But I think that there was more of a focus in CD1. But there were some good Republicans in CD2, and there were some great independents in CD2 that, unfortunately, as you and I were talking about, we didn't have the resources to be able to reach out to them.
That's right.
But our message was resonating with them. You don't close on a 5-term incumbent and fall within 6 percentage points by not having a message that was out there. So I think that was something that was to be built upon, right? Not abandoned. And so I think the options are. The governor has a counter proposal. I don't know where the legislature is going to go, and that's their prerogative. That's their responsibility to determine that. Or you leave it alone, right? And you leave it alone, and so you go into 22 with the existing map, for another 10 years, and say, okay, so maybe what you need to do is work harder in CD2, and both the CD2 and CD1, because both currently have Democratic representatives, and let's figure out collectively as Republicans in the state what we need to do to win back those seats.
Well, I think the people that are in those seats are very stuck with what's happening in the federal government right now.
Absolutely.
I mean, they have a hard tag to get rid of. And
that's the message, I think, Carl, that unfortunately, we weren't able to get out. When you look at, historical and voting records and things that had happened in both congressional districts, it is strictly party driven. And the truth of the matter is the state is a purple state. It isn't one way or another, despite the fact that our entire federal delegation is Democratic. Our entire state government is Republican.
Right.
So what does that tell you? It tells you that in the places in this state that there is an opportunity for those good, strong, conservative, value-minded Republicans and those in the middle, right? Because you could have somebody that's a moderate, but sometimes a moderate conservatively, and sometimes a moderate with a little bit more of a liberty-moving, leaning agenda. So the state isn't lost.
No,
I think that with the proposed redistricting, they gave up on half of the state. I think that was, like I said, I think that was very tactical and not strategic and not long-term view of it. And so I think that there is a possibility here that, given, I told you earlier, my father used to say that good things happen to you because of two things: luck and timing, and you don't control either. And right now, I think, given what we clearly see what the Democrats want to do, even within the state, and certainly in a smaller scale, but what they want to do federally, is now the emperor has no clothes.
Right.
Everybody knows exactly what they want to do. They're not behind the screens anymore and hiding. It's clear what they want to do. It's clear what the agenda is. And quite frankly, we've seen not only in the state of New Hampshire, but all across the country, things that are happening at the local level with the education boards, the Board of Eds, and all the things about things that they were pushing. And I think the American people are now going to say, enough. It doesn't matter how you label it. America is not that way.
Right.
And I think here is an opportunity for somebody to do really good in these races, not only in New Hampshire, but across the country.
Well, we certainly got it in the last election. We saw that the people felt that way.
Yes.
It wasn't going right for them, whatever label they were.
Right.
And I also, in the 4 terms that I actually ran 8 times, and only made it 4 times. But
a 500 hitter, you're in the Hall of Fame.
Right? There we go. But that people sometimes didn't want to identify because of the stigma on one group or the other.
Right.
And so you have to come out and you say what you're for and why you wanted to run.
Right.
And they would usually go for that.
You know, and I think people want to hear a candidate say, you know, why you versus somebody else, right? In my opinion, it doesn't do us any good to go in this pit bull mode and go on the attack and attack that person, right? Because it's always easier to attack the incumbent, right? It's always easier to, you know, everybody hated the Patriots when they were winning because they won, right? And knock them off the pedestal. So, you know, what we always try to do is just try to say, what is different between the current congressperson that's there and yourself? What would you do different? And let people make a decision. And when you look at, you know, it's about cause and effect. What are the things that they've supported? How has it helped or how has it hurt you? And I think what we're seeing right now over this latest administration, if you just look at since day one when they took office, there hasn't been a lot of help. There's been a lot of hurt. And they always try to pin the donkey on somebody else, and we all know who that somebody else is. But at the end of the day, they need to own it. And you can't always just point the finger at somebody else. And I think not only here in the state, because when the Democrats ran the House, thank goodness for Govenor Sununu and all his vetoes, because it would have just been catastrophic. Right. So we had a stopgap. We had a detente that was able to hold them at bay. We haven't had that such luxury at the federal level. And you could just see it everywhere you turn. I mean, everybody talks about gas, but it's more than gas. It's the cost of any product that's out there, you know? And so I think now's an opportunity for all Americans to say, you know, this is not the path. And there was just a Quinnipiac poll that said that 62%, I think, said the country's going in the wrong direction. So how do you flip in a year and a half where we were, right? And all of a sudden now it's more than half of the country is saying that
and they're still going. They're still adding to what was causing the problem.
Absolutely.
Is causing the problem.
And now it's incumbent upon us, and we shouldn't be assumptive to say that all of a sudden, you know, people don't like the incumbent party in Washington. We need to be energized. Republicans need to be energized. And we need to start going out there and taking, you know, them to task and not just assuming anything, right? Because, you know, the old story about, you know, assuming, you know, if you assume something. So, you know, we need to starting now, you know, starting at local level, you know, starting at, you know, Board of Eds and getting seats on those. And we've done some good things here, right? We won 4 aldermanic seats or 4. And that's the start. So, and it doesn't end there. So I think right now you're going into what President Trump saw in 2018 is that this is going to be President Biden's midterm, which historically is not good for the incumbent. But not only is it not good historically, what they've done policy-wise is nothing short of catastrophic.
And show the contrast.
Absolutely. You know, and just look at empirical data, right? Take personalities out of it if you want. Just look at, you know, this is where we were on this day, here we are now. Then let's talk about why we went from A to B. Right. And it's not an upward slide, it's a downward slide. So let's talk about those things that happen and don't even mention party affiliation, don't even mention people. And you're going to say, because of this policy, this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And people are going to say, that's not what we want.
And I think we can really point to the future. The economic problem is not that it can't be fixed. Okay, we have a lot of potential. It's just a matter of putting it out there and using it properly, and not putting in too many restrictions on it.
You know, that's such a great point, Carl. Is that when you look at the potential of where we were, and we were on a good path. There's always things. You know, one of the things that I always disagree with President Trump on was that we didn't do enough about debt reduction. Right. We need to do those things. Whether you're, you know, an independent, if you're a libertarian, if you're a Democrat, Republican, this debt that we have now, it's almost $30 trillion, if it hasn't reached that now, is crushing us, right? So we need to do some things, and we need to just be honest with ourselves. And I said this when I was campaigning, is that, you know, everybody's got to get involved, and everybody's got to have a say in this, and it's going to be painful. You know, you know, we have now gotten so far in debt, we've got to do some things that are going to hurt. But the only way out of this thing, there's only one way out, and that's straight ahead. And let's do some things. Let's reinvigorate this economy. You know, we found some things that have happened to us coming out of this pandemic, you know, that made us rely on some things that were beyond your control. And we find in our everyday lives, when you have a dependency, when you're dependent on somebody else, you really can't control a lot of things because you're always waiting on that thing to happen. And we found out what happened to us in COVID-19. That we had come to a point where we were very relaxed with some of our dependencies with outside countries and what we depended on. And I think now we realize, okay, maybe we need to start looking at something else, right? And start realizing that, not to become isolationist, that's not what I'm saying, but realize that this economy can get us booming back. We can come back to being energy independent. It's just amazing to me that I put my head on a pillow and we look at, and I got a 1999 Suburban that has a 42-gallon tank, and I have to take out a loan to fill up my car. And it's crazy when you look at some of the, and it's not even us here yet. Look at California, $6.50 a gallon. That's ridiculous.
And that philosophy, you're just throwing money at your problems without any plan, without any looking of how it's going to react, and if it reacts wrong, be able to change it.
Right.
I mean, one of the things that bothers me the most is how much money they're finding that was wasted or stolen or whatever. They can't determine what happened to it.
Right.
How can you miss billions of dollars? I mean, we're not talking about millions, it's billions.
It is, and it's funny because our government is so big.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've always thought about is that, a basic difference is I believe in a smaller, limited government, right? And I believe that the states should be responsible for themselves. And the federal government, they do have a role, but their role isn't to be my sugar mama or my sugar daddy forever, right? Give me a construct by which I can work within. And so when you look at these horror stories, when you look at some of these COVID relief packages, when you look at some of these things that they want more money when there's still $1 billion or $1 trillion they haven't even spent yet.
Right.
And now you start seeing about all these, like the paycheck protection program that was out there. And people, anytime there's an opportunity for free money,
they take it.
They take it, right? And there's an element out there that's going to try to outsmart the system and try to get that. And then you see these guys, and I had a small business, and I took out a payroll protection plan, and we have to pay it back, but we use it in a way that it was intended to. When you start reading some of these horror stories that people are doing car payments and buying cars when it was supposed to be able to help you get through this very trying time and keep your folks on payroll, because if you don't keep them on payroll, they're going to go off and get on the dole of the U.S. government.
Right.
And now what do we have? We have a worker shortage because people are realizing that they can get money for free, not have to work. And now you got people that restaurants, the other day, a 24-hour restaurant, which I used to love to go to, was closed. I'm like, why? Because they can't get people to work.
Yeah.
You can't, call me old-fashioned. I believe that the thing that helps people move the ball forward and get inspired is to have a sense of self-worth, that you're doing something as hard as it. Most people. But you know what? When you allow people to become dependent, it's no different than somebody who gets dependent on some other things, right? They need it even more.
Right.
And now you have to break that cycle and bring them back to the workplace that, you know what? You got to get up. You got to leave your house now.
Yeah.
You got to get dressed for work. You got to go to work. You got to put in your 8 hours, and you got to come home. That's the way it's supposed to be. It's not that you stay at home and get paid for doing nothing.
Right.
The only blessing I have my parents not being around is they'd both be just beside themselves. They were both immigrants, hardworking, right? But they knew the value of what it meant to earn a dollar. And I have 3 children, young adults now. And I have to tell them, you got to work.
Yeah.
And some may want to, my youngest is in law school, and she's seeing some of this. She's like, Dad, I don't see some of my friends talk about friends that they stop working and now they don't have to work, And I said, that's going to come to an end.
Yeah.
It has to. You cannot. Nobody can do it for free. There was an old saying that a colonel told me once: is that when somebody gets nothing for something, somebody gets something for nothing. And there's no free ticket out there. So it's going to come to an end. But I think this American economy has the potential.
Oh, yes.
If you unleash it, right, to get us back to a place.
There's so many different technologies that are trying to be developed.
Absolutely.
And you have to encourage them.
Yep.
And I just hope that somebody wakes up.
Lift the restrictions. It amazes me. You're an engineer. General Patton famously said, don't tell a soldier what to do.
Yeah.
Tell a soldier what you want done.
Right.
And he'll surprise you with his ingenuity,
way,
right?
right.
And the same thing with engineering. And there's so many things in this world that we could be doing if we just unencumbered them.
That's right.
And let that whole creativity get unleashed. And we certainly can do it.
And look, to make up for some of the errors that they made behind. I mean, get rid of them quickly.
Right.
You can't just let them exist. I mean, the budget came out, or the proposed budget by the president, and I don't know if you heard it and all the things that he wants to do, and he didn't see anything about correcting some of the big problems that they made.
You know, it's unfortunate that when you, especially in public life, when you aspire and you get to that position, that you look behind you, there's so many mouths that you think you need to feed because they help you get to that. Now, I understand some of that, but you know, is it in the best interest of your party, or is it in the best interest of the country? And the president should be the president for the entire, U.S. population, and not just for one half of it. And when you look at what happened in 20, half the country went one way and the other half went the other. So this is an opportunity to bring everybody back together and say, okay, we can have our subtle differences, or we can even have big differences, but at the end of the day, are we doing the things to move the country forward? And we came to almost a standstill. We're moving backwards, right? And it's sad, because I thought that we were coming out to a place where I think the United States had established itself again as that beacon for people around the world. And now they see and they look at us and how we respond to world events, how they respond to certainly the things that are happening in the Ukraine currently as it was, or how we got out of Afghanistan. There's just so many things, and you don't want to be the person that just sits back and points fingers. Come with a solution. Find a better way to do. There's always a better way. So let's find a better way to do some things, and let's get us back on the right track. And I think there's a great opportunity for us to do that in 22.
And I think just a few years ago, we had somebody in there that was doing just that.
In my opinion, yes, we were.
Yeah, he was a guy that could do something when he saw something going wrong.
Right.
I mean, he wasn't trained in it. He was just, that's that way he built his.
And I think a lot of people resented him because they were not used to the way he was doing things. He took a completely different approach to how he wanted to run this country. And a lot of people took great umbrage with some of the things that he did. Now, you can criticize a person and his personality, and you have every right to do that, but you really can't criticize what the net effect he was having on the country. And when you looked at where we were when it came to energy, where we were when it came to the number of illegal crossings in the southern border, what he was doing. And in my opinion, everything he was trying to do was to try to make this country better. Right. And you have a current administration that I think their first charter was, I don't know if it's better or worse, but I'm just going to undo everything that this president did, regardless of whether or not it had any merit.
Further than that.
Right.
They're going to undo something, and of course everything's going to be good. No, they didn't.
That's right.
It was messed up.
Right. And I think it's a sad state. And we have a Senate that's at 50-50. I think my hat's off to both Joe Manchin and
the other two
Kristen Sinema. That I may not agree with them 95% of the time, but they're standing on principle on what's right. And not being bullied by their party. And I think if more people took that, I got to tell you, my respect for both of them, because they're doing it in face of even their own party just criticizing them, but they know that the spending was not right. And sometimes you have to put person above party. You have to put this country above party. And I think they too have now they're pariahs. Right now they want to get primaried and kick out. And it's amazing that they were willing to take that. And we as conservatives and Republicans need to be able to do the same thing.
Right.
And so I think that we have an opportunity, a huge opportunity, both in the state and in 22, to do some things and to send a message to not only everybody in this country, but everybody across the world that, we take our elections seriously. We know that sometimes in the Navy or in sailing, if you going into wind and the wind dies, you tack the boat and you find the breeze and you go. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to tack the country right now, figure out where we're going, and put the right people in place to make sure that happens.
Well, one thing that they were focusing on in the 2016 was, let's empty the swamp. Let's clean the swamp.
Yep.
And I think that's what we need to do.
Absolutely.
We're not doing it now, but he cleaned a lot of this.
And I think that's why he had so many bullseyes on his back.
Right.
That he was an outsider. Right. He wasn't part of the group. And he challenged them, and they didn't like it. And, and they'll find everything to criticize an individual about, which they did. The thing that kind of sometimes is a burn my saddle is that if you're going to do that, then be that way across the board.
Right.
You can't just be, collective or collectively you decide one way versus the other. It seems very hypocritical about those kind of things. So, if you want to play with fire, then play with fire across the board.
Well, you could see that way he changed people. If they weren't working right, you're out.
Just this whole thing with the Ukraine, you look at where NATO is today to be able to be more cohesive. It wasn't because of anything this current administration did.
Right.
As you look at what happened in 2017, where he went over to NATO and goes, you know what, I am done paying for this entire party.
Right.
Everybody needs to start paying their fair share, which is 2% of GDP. And if you don't do it, then I'm gone.
Yeah.
Right? And that's not being mean or a bully or it was a mean tweet. It was just that he's looking out for the interests of this country. I'm going to pay my fair share, and everybody else who signed pays their fair share. And if you want me to be that country that's going to stand by you in accordance with Article 5 of the NATO treaty, then you better be doing what you need to be doing. And I think because of that, you see a very strong NATO, a stronger NATO right now, strictly because of what President Trump did.
I think you're right. And Steve, we're coming to an end here, but I want to have part 2.
Okay,
Can we have part 2?
Absolutely.
Because we never got to some of the other things we said we were going to talk about.
Well, you and I start talking and we can talk forever. So
that's right.
Absolutely.
And I think we make some good points that people ought to take into consideration.
I appreciate that.
Okay. And so people, if you want to help the Republican Club, they're looking for help in the help with the candidates and the election coming up this year. Please contact them. They meet the second Wednesday of the month and over at the Marriott. Okay, and tune in here to the People's Voice, and we'll see more action. Thank you for listening.
Bye-bye, Carl.
Steve, thank you.
Thank you.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.